Hello and welcome to the Atomic Impact Podcast, designed to help business owners and leaders with short atomic episodes to impact your business for marketing, sales, business growth, personal growth, and much, much more. I'm your host, Jason Osborne, and I'm looking forward for your business and life to be positively impacted by this podcast. And as a thank you, just for listening, I'd like to give you free access to my LinkedIn mini course to help you get on the right track with LinkedIn to generate high quality leads without being spammy. All you need to do is go to www.impactforleads.com to get immediate access. Now, let's jump into today's episode. Hey, it's Jason Osborne here again with the Atomic Impact Podcast. And I'm once again really excited to have Ryan Smith here on the podcast today. And I just got to tell you, I was actually on Ryan, and he's a co-host of a podcast called the Digital Marketing Happy Hour podcast. Him and Chris, I was on their podcast a few months ago, I think now, and we just hit it off. And I had to have Ryan on the podcast. I'll have Chris on another episode as well. And just really looking forward to having Ryan on. He is a digital marketer helping small to medium-sized businesses with their marketing and growth strategies. And as I said, he's a co-host of the Digital Marketing Happy Hour, which if you are not a subscriber, you got to subscribe. They've got some great content on there. But Ryan, thanks so much for being on the podcast today, man.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be with you again. Like you said, we had such a great conversation, and just to be able to be on your podcast now as a guest, I'm looking forward to it.
Great, man. Cool. Well, one of the things we were chatting about kind of pre-show, and so I'm in the digital marketing space. You're in the digital marketing space. I've been doing online marketing for, almost 14 years now. And it's always amazing to be able to speak to other people that are clued in. And I think you know what I mean by that. You know, there are a lot of people that are claiming to be digital marketers or how to help people. And I realize everyone's got to have a start somewhere. But they literally just started, and they might be using automation tools. I see that a lot on LinkedIn right now, just spamming people and all that sort of stuff. But it's great to speak to someone who really gets it, man. And I love chatting with you about it. But I'd love to understand a little bit more about those challenges, the things that we were talking about earlier, and what you can kind of feed in and help people around, maybe the things that people are doing wrong or don't do, and what you can advise people on through that process, man. Really love to hear your input around that.
You know, it's funny. It's great to hear that you're 14th. This is, I believe, is my 15th year. So, you know, when you have that amount of time, as much as digital marketing has evolved, and it just seems like it's constantly changing and evolving, there are certain things that are still mainstays that will never change. And, you know, those are the things I still see when people are just starting off working in digital marketing or just business in general. And some of those things I see are, they get started and they don't know their audience. They're so quick to just, I have new business, I have my product, and I know I have to create a Facebook ad because there's still tons of people on Facebook ad, and they just go right into it. And at the end of the day, you probably will end up creating a Facebook ad, but there's so many different types of ads. There's so many different types of people to target, and you can't do any of that until you understand who your audience is. And that's the biggest thing. And so I also get like, well, how do you know who your audience is? And it kind of depends. And now if you're just getting started, it's a little bit harder to identify because you might not have a whole lot of data. Maybe you've talked to people and you can interview or have a better understanding of their needs and concerns. So that might help. But once you get going and you're established, and you have Google Analytics running for you, for an example, you can start to better understand who's coming to your website. Not just Google Analytics, but dig down, create goals, meaning, and goal is, you know, a conversion. And I always like to specify, and this is one area too, a conversion in Google Analytics shouldn't be somebody was on your, you know, touched 4 or 5 pages, or they spent 5 minutes on your website. A conversion should be, from a marketing standpoint, that you got some sort of information from them, meaning they gave you their phone number, their name, their email address, any of those three. that is what you need. And so count those as conversions. Not a conversion as somebody scrolled 75% down my page. Those are nice. Those are good key performance indicators if people are consuming your content, but I wouldn't count that as a conversion. So when you can start looking at conversions and over time you get enough data, you can kind of go back and look and see, okay, what types of people are coming to my website and just leaving? They might read a blog, they might leave. And what types of people are coming, reading? Maybe they leave, but then they come back again. And this time they fill out a form or they request some sort of information. Or if you're into the content marketing, you create a lead magnet where somebody gives you their email address and then you have a guide that they can download or some sort of PDF, usually is one of the most popular ways to do it. So once you get that, you can better understand who your audience is. And Google Analytics does a great job of telling you not just the basics of the demographics, their age, where they're located from, but you can also find out what modes and means of transportation in a way did they take to get to your website, and then what was the way that drove them, the last thing they did, meaning maybe they came through organic search and then they filled out a form. So I think Google Analytics is a very powerful tool. It can be overwhelming and a little scary for people, especially starting off, but I highly recommend that you get a starter course or go through the Google Analytics training just so you can understand this, so that you can better understand your audience. Because if you don't understand your audience, it kind of goes back to that traditional, even in a digital way, it's a pray and spray mentality. And that's what TV commercial where you would buy a spot on a TV channel and your demo would be on that, but so would a whole bunch of other people, and you have a lot of waste. So if you don't know your audience, you could still have a lot of wasted spend on the digital side because you just aren't fine tuning, and it makes it harder to really get those conversions we talked about. So for me, the big thing is to know your audience.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. And one of the things that I'd love to just chat through a little bit more with you is, that whole element of people looking maybe at the wrong numbers to start off with. So even what you said, someone scrolled down 75% of the way of the page. Okay, cool. That's great. It's kind of a feel good factor, but in terms of actual business, like what's it producing for your business? Is it doing anything for you that way? And I know one of the things I constantly deal with my own clients is they're focusing on the wrong things. They'll
Mhm.
I need to make my website prettier, or I need to change the color scheme, or I need, they look at all of that sort of stuff. But when you actually get into well, what are you doing to drive the traffic? As you said, who's your audience? Are you speaking the right language to your target audience? I mean, if you're talking about how to uh, make money, but actually your target market is people that are just wanting to find a new job, those are two completely different niches, you know and then the message is incongruent, and it's those types of things. So what have you found with clients you worked with on just the things that I think they think is the right things, but actually they're focusing on the wrong stuff to really help them move forward in the digital marketing?
Yeah, you find that a lot too, and not just when you're presenting. So, say if you work in the agency world, and you're meeting with your clients, a lot of times clients always have their own opinions on things, and sometimes it's not even based on anything more than I just don't think it's working. And it's like, well, why don't you think it's working? I don't know. I just don't think it's working, for
Yeah.
whatever it is. And I think that's okay to a certain extent because I'm a big person of testing and trying things out. So if anybody says, hey, I think we should do this, okay, I would say, great. Why? Why do you think that? I'm not opposed to it. I just want to, and it's always trying to understand where they're coming from. Okay, great. How? And the question is, how are you going to measure it? What are we going to measure? Because you need to go into, and that's really campaign creation. When you're starting some sort of new campaign, sort of new endeavor in the digital marketing world, you need to know where you're at the beginning, have some benchmarks, what goals you're going to use, what KPIs that you're going to measure, and what does success look like? And I think that's the biggest thing that people have to answer that question. what does success look like to you? It's going to look something different to everybody. And I think especially if you're in the agency side and you're dealing with a client, or within your own company and you're a digital marketer and you have to report to your director of marketing, to your vice president of marketing, to your CMO, whoever that may be, you have to know what success looks like to them. Because if you're a marketing manager and you're getting the opportunity to present the results to the vice president or to a CMO, A, good for you, but B, they're not going to care about how many clicks a certain ad got. What they care about is, you got to know your audience here. They care about is, how did it generate revenue? How much did you spend to get that much revenue? Because it comes down to dollars and cents, you know? So I think that's a part of it, knowing, setting up the goals, setting up the KPIs, knowing at the end, you got to know what success looks like. And it does depend on who your internal audience is.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I was just speaking to somebody the other day. We were in a meeting, and they were going over different numbers of an ad campaign that was happening, and they were talking about impressions and reach and all of that sort of stuff. And I was just wanting to get to, well, okay, what was the ad spend? What were the conversions? And conversion is just how many opt-ins, so we know what our cost per lead is, and then how many sales, so we know what our cost per lead, were we profitable, all that sort of stuff. And it was interesting, that they weren't focusing on those numbers. They're looking at reach, and to me, reach doesn't really mean a lot. I mean, we can reach a whole lot of people, but if it doesn't have that outcome that you're talking about, what's the point?
What's great is in Digital Marketing Happy Hour, my co-host Chris Casale, he always talks about the thing that drives him nuts, and I like repeating this because it is true, and I just never thought of it this way. When you talk about goals setting up, and the first thing is, our goal is to get more brand awareness, and it's like, that isn't a goal. Like, what is greater brand awareness? And I think it's just so common that it's almost like this default mechanism that somewhere along the way, it's easy to remember, it's easy to say, like, this is what we want to do. And sometimes people don't stop and think, well, what does that really mean? And at the end of the day, how does brand awareness going to drive revenue? Now, is it going to directly drive it? Maybe. Is it a KPI? Is it a starting place in the journey of building your brand and getting it out there to reach your audience? Yes. And I think what people miss is what context should these KPIs be a part of? And sometimes they take it and they think, like, impressions and reach. That's great, but it means nothing if it wasn't your right audience. And it means even less if people aren't engaging with it and you're driving the traffic to a place where you can get a conversion, where you can get their contact information from. So those are things at the beginning. And that comes back to number one, you got to know your audience with that. The other thing I see, and I'll put this number two, is they're so quick to go to a tactical approach first and not lead with strategy. And it's very common that people, two things I noticed that misnomers is, one is knowing the difference between what your strategy is and then what your tactic is. And then also understanding the difference between what your objective is and what your goal is, So your strategy, that's your overall plan. Your tactic is how you're going to get there with it. And you have to have the strategy, because if you don't have a strategy, how do you know what tactics are going to help get your plan there? So that's why I was saying at the very beginning of this conversation, Jason, you can't start saying, all right, I have this budget, we're just going to go create Facebook ads. And, it's like you got to pump the brakes a little bit, and Facebook ads might be a part of it, but you have to better understand, which way to go first based on your strategy. The other thing with goals, is we were just kind of talking about Google Analytics and so forth. The objective is, okay, one objective, which every company should have, is, you want to drive leads, and a lot of people say, okay, no, that's our goal. It's like brand awareness. No, that's an objective. Your goal has to be those SMART goals, right? It has to be specific, it has to be measurable, and so forth, all the way down, where you could say, okay, we want to generate X amount of leads by this date. It could be next month. It could be in Q1, Q4. Maybe it's a fiscal year, whatever that may be. And then obviously you want to compare it to see if you actually increase. We want to compare Q1 to Q1 of last year. So objectives are big, but they're not goals. And I think those two sets, I think, are areas where people really get confused. And with that, they go right to the, tactic approach first, and not necessarily let's get strategic and then get down into, which tactics we should use to, drive leads.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just so much good stuff you're saying there, Ryan. Whether you are a solopreneur or whether you're a large company and you're, looking to work with an agency, or as you said, Ryan, you're doing it in-house and you're reporting to a CMO or, whoever, board or whatever it is that you're doing, what are those really clear objectives that you're working towards, laying those out, and ultimately how's that actually producing for you in terms of revenue and growth in what you're doing. And if you're not clear on what those goals and your aims are with that, it's hard because, as you said, it's a scattergun approach. You're literally
Mhm.
just throwing mud up against the wall to see what works. And yes, you've got to test. So I'm not saying, I mean, I get asked questions all the time, and I'm sure you do as well, Ryan. And I call them crystal ball questions, where people ask me like, "What ad is going to perform the best?" Like, do you know what? If I knew that, I'd be a billionaire.
Right.
Like, I don't know. We've got to test this stuff, but you have to have, what's the goal of the ad? What's the purpose of that? And as you said, just having brand awareness, that's, I mean, you can go out and just put your card on every single car you see, and that's brand awareness. But is it really? I mean, is that really what you're looking to do? I mean, it's so untargeted, as you said, like the TV ads and stuff. So having real clear objectives around that, I think, is so important, and great insight and wisdom in that. So cool. Is anything else you kind of want to share into that, Ryan, or just off the top of your head? Because I know you've got
Yeah.
loads to add in.
Well, give me all day and we'll keep going.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's a third part to this too, and which goes back to knowing your audience. And again, knowing your audience, the third part is also, let's say you have your strategy now. Now we have gone down, we have our tactics. We know we're going to hit these different areas. We're going to invest in content marketing. That content marketing is going to clearly be optimized for the search engines on our website. We're also going to do native ads, and maybe we have a great blog post that we want to push it on Facebook to our audience and all that. I think those are great, right? But the next thing too is your messaging. So once you know your audience, you also have to know is what stage of the so-called funnel are they at? Are they
Yeah.
at the very beginning where they don't even know where they're starting at? If that's the case, and let's say you create a Facebook ad and it's a brand awareness campaign, you have to also know the brand awareness campaign isn't necessarily going to drive leads right off the bat, or it's not going to drive sales. You have to warm them up to who you are. You have to let them know that you are an expert in your field, which helps you create authority, and that prospective customer ends up trusting you with that. So those are the couple of things. And some examples to that is, that's where blog posts, I think, are still so powerful. Now, blog posts on their own, it's a little bit harder for search engines. You have to create tons of content and so forth, but you can use them in other modes. You want to market your marketing. So you want to take your blog post, let's say you put it on a Facebook ad, and you're going out and you're trying to get a whole new audience. You don't necessarily want them. I mean, it's great if they buy you right off the bat, but it's not realistic. So you want them to give them information that helps solve a problem. And they look at you as like, oh, wow, this person's an expert. I'm not ready to buy today. Because remember, something like Facebook is a little bit intrusive, right? These aren't people, you're trying to create a demand. So they're not searching for your product when they're scrolling on Facebook, looking at pictures and of their friends and family and videos and so forth. So I think you have to keep that in mind as your messaging, and understand where, when you send something out, whoever your target audience is, you have to know where they're at in the buying cycle. And it's difficult at first. I think that's a big learning curve for people
Yeah.
who are, especially if you're just getting started. But even if you've been in it a while, not everybody quite gets it, and it's a moving target. So you have to know your messaging. If somebody's just at the brand awareness stage, don't expect them to download your product, or don't expect them to buy anything right off the bat. They can. I just wouldn't expect it right off the bat. So to me, it's, you have to tailor your messaging to where each prospect is in the buying cycle.
Yeah.
So again, it kind of starts at the top where they're just becoming aware. Now maybe they've interacted with your website a couple of times. Now they're in that awareness stage, and maybe they're starting to make the decision, okay, I'm gonna buy your product or service, or I'm comparing it to somebody else's, you know. So now you might want to give them a little bit of a sample, a free trial. You want to get those people maybe into a webinar where you can teach them, and in that webinar you get them to convert, you know, at the end of it, so that they can you've built that expertise and that authority and that trust with them. So there are steps to follow, and I think sometimes we're too quickly to go right for the sale. And you see that tons on LinkedIn. My goodness, you connect with somebody and they're right there. Hey, can I get a
All the
15-minute
time.
call so we
Yeah.
can chat? You know, it's all, so the people are killing LinkedIn. But if you, and that's by the way, it's a pray and spray approach when they just link up with you and immediately try
Yep.
to sell. So I think when you tailor your messaging to better understand to where each person is in the funnel, you'll have way more success with it. So those are the three things. And it all goes back to knowing your audience, coming up with a strategy, and then the tactics, and then make sure you tailor your messaging to fit wherever they're at in the buying cycle and within the funnel.
Yeah, man, seriously, like that's some amazing, amazing content. And you're so right about LinkedIn as well. I mean, that's my specialty is around LinkedIn, and people are just spamming the heck out of people. They're using automation tools that don't understand they don't understand platforms, which I think is really important that most, I think still a lot of marketers don't get that. Like whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, they want to make sure their users have the best experience on the platform. And if you're constantly spamming people on any platform, the the platforms will make sure to find ways to stop you from doing that because they're going to lose their market share and they're not willing to do that. So you have to be able to have your approach right. But one of the things that just something you were chatting around the whole brand awareness and your messaging and all that kind of stuff that I'll just drop in, and then we're probably over time, and I knew we probably would be because we can just chat about this all day. But you know, whenever I'm speaking with clients as well, they always, not always, but a lot of times they go to that real quick. I just want to get that brand, that brand thing. And it's interesting to me because they're like, oh, I want to be like the Coca-Cola of my industry. And okay, well, you're nowhere near Coke. You don't have anywhere near the spending power that Coke has or anything like that. And it reminds me of those commercials way back in the day of, the Pepsi taste test stuff. They had a big campaign around this, around, uh, having people taste, well, is it Coke or Pepsi, and which one tastes better? And of course, it was always Pepsi tastes better, which I personally prefer Pepsi myself as well. But what they did with that, if you actually look at what they were doing, is that whole process was to create social proof that everyone else was going, oh, there's something that tastes better than Coke. And when you go into that branding process, as you said, just if you put something an ad up and you're just trying to brand yourself, they don't know you. Why would they buy from you? So looking at it from how you're creating the social proof, adding the value to them and piquing people's curiosity is what's going to help people actually take notice of you. Once you get a large enough client base and you create that momentum and you've got kind of that following, then that's where the brand really starts to come in. So I think people they try to jump to the brand because it's a real cliche type of, oh yeah, let's get our branding. And it's like, but you don't really understand branding. Like no one knows you. Like, why would they buy from you? So I
And
think,
I think that I love that, and I love your Coke example too, by the way, which I can go off on a trail on that. But you're right, people want to be Coke, and here's the thing: when your brand becomes the verb, right? So a brand is a noun; it's your name. It's people think of it as the name, but when it turns into a verb, like I'm going to Google it, those types of things. Nobody asks for, a box of tissues. They say, do you have a Kleenex?
Yeah.
Nobody says, I want to make a copy on a piece of paper, photocopy or anything. It says, I'm going to Xerox it, right? That is when you've reached the pinnacle of branding, when they associate everything with your product. And it's interesting about your Pepsi thing, right? So I'm in Florida, in the USA, and the whole and Coca-Cola headquarters, global headquarters, is in Atlanta. And they have done such an amazing job of getting it all over, especially the East. I would say east of the Mississippi River, Coke dominates. Pepsi, a little bit more out west, but even Coca-Cola spills into their area a little bit. But on the East Coast, it is all Coke. Matter of fact, when you go into restaurants, especially in the southern part of the USA, it's no longer a soda. They say, do you want a Coke?
Yeah.
They've replaced soda with Coke. In different parts of the USA, they actually have sodas called different things. Like in the Midwest, they don't call it soda, they call it pop, right?
Yeah.
Well, in the South, it's just a Coke. Would you like a Coke? So for brands to achieve that sort of success, and it's like, I love the brands you want to think that way, but from where you are and where Coca-Cola is, you have a few decades before you get to that level of it. And I just tell people, with your branding is important. And at the end of the day, your brand is what your consumers, what they think of you. Like, that's your brand. It's what they think you are. You have a great product, or you're the best in this and that. At the end of the day, the brand is controlled by the consumers. The company influences their thinking, but you can't control it. And if a consumer thinks your company is awful and you have bad customer service, guess what? Your Google reviews are going to tell you that you have awful product and awful customer service, and that forms your brand. And I think a lot of people miss that. They just think, man, I have a great website and I spend a lot of money and I have a fancy looking logo. That's my brand. And it's so much more than that.
So much more than that, man. Dude, listen, Ryan, invaluable content you drop in there. Thanks so much for sharing that. Anyone that wants to find you, connect with you, learn more about what you do, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, definitely. If you like this conversation that Jason and I had, and you want to hear a deeper conversation, digital marketing happy hour, Jason Osborne his name is in the title of it. So please check that out on all podcast platforms. And just like you, I'm visible on LinkedIn. There's a lot of Ryan Smiths out there, but I did something smart a long time ago when you can personalize your URL on LinkedIn. So mine is Ryan Smith Marketing. So if you do a LinkedIn search for that, you'll find me there. Those are the best ways. But Jason, as always, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, amazing, man. Absolutely wonderful. Cheers, Ryan. Thanks so much, man. Chat to you later.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Atomic Impact Podcast. And as a reminder, please go to www.impactforleads.com to get free access to my LinkedIn mini course to help you get on the right track with LinkedIn to generate high quality leads without being spammy. And please also like and share this episode with others and leave a comment, as I'd love to hear from you. This is Jason Osborne, and I look forward to sharing the next episode of the Atomic Impact Podcast with you.